Maria?
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Maria Hernandez Ojeda. I am a board member of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archives. On behalf of ALBA, thank you to everyone who is attending this panel discussion. We're proud to present a film by our own Peter Miller, an ALBA board member, and we thank him for sharing his award-winning film with us. Thank you also to Holly Neer and Robin D.G. Kelley for joining the panel discussion, and also to Peter Glazer, ALBA board member, who will serve as moderator. We'd like to acknowledge the partnership of Isaac Zablocki and the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. We encourage you to check out their website for the exciting lineup of films that they offer. Events like this are made possible only by your generous contributions. So please consider donating to ALBA at alba-val.org/donate. I believe that Dennis is posting this link right now as I am speaking, right? So please note, this is an important note, please note that we will record today's event for future viewing. So if you don't wish to be recorded, please turn off your camera. Now, I will introduce Peter Glazer, today's moderator. Peter has been a member of the ALBA board for 25 years. He is a playwright and director and teaches in the Department of Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies at UC Berkeley. He has co-written and directed numerous commemorative events for the organization over the years. His stage musical, Heart of Spain, co-authored with composer Eric Peltanimi, was produced on the Berkeley campus in 2016 as part of programming recognizing the 80th anniversary of the start of the Spanish Civil War. We are 173 people, so this is really exciting. Thank you all again, and now I turn it over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Maria, and thanks everyone for coming, and the numbers keep climbing. It's wonderful to have you here today to be able to talk about this incredible film. In a moment, we're going to show you a clip from the film, just about a minute, to remind everyone of the material. But before we do that, I want to introduce our magnificent panel. Robin D.G. Kelley is a member of ALBA's honorary board. His prolific writing and research has explored the history of social movements in the United States, the African diaspora, and Africa, as well as music, visual culture, contemporary urban studies, poverty studies, and ethnography, colonialism and imperialism, organized labor, Marxism, nationalism, and many other topics. His books include the prize-winning Thelonious Monk, The Life and Times of an American Original. Robin is joining us from down in the Los Angeles area. Welcome, Robin. ALBA board member Peter Miller is an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning filmmaker whose documentaries have screened in cinemas and television throughout the world. He directed the film we are discussing today, the Internationale, which was shortlisted for an Academy Award nomination. Most recently, he co-wrote and produced Bedlam, about the crisis in care for the severely mentally ill, which premiered at Sundance Film Festival and aired on PBS Independent Lens. Holly Neer has been singing for a more equitable world for well over 50 creative years, respected around the world for her music and activism. Holly released her 31st album in 2018. I dare anyone else to match that accomplishment. Holly was one of the first women, Seeger, well, anyone here for that matter, okay, Seeger. Holly was one of the first women to create an independent record company and is often cited as one of the founders of the women's music movement. Holly has not only led the way for outspoken women in the music world, but also worked for peace and multicultural consciousness. So we are thrilled to have you all here today. I want to give you a couple of reminders before we watch the trailer. We will be taking your questions in the chat, and Dennis will feed them to us as they come. So if you have questions, you can start loading them up now, and Dennis will curate them and send them to us when the clip is over. And now we're going to see this short clip of the film, The Internationale. maybe.
The story of a song.
The Internationale has very, very stirring lyrics.
That could change the world.
It was sung all around the world, still is, by socialists, communists, anarchists, all sorts of people sing this song.
When I hear now International, I feel the beautiful melody again and again, but I feel the tragedy too.
Internationale captures the essence of Confucianism, fighting for what you believed in, and their sacrifice will be rewarded in history.
And if there's a world here, 100 years from now, this song will be part of that world.
Millions of voices, hundreds of languages, one song. The Internationale.
Thank you, Peter. That was beautiful. Thanks, everyone. And thanks for getting that. Someday we will all be in movie theaters again. Let's keep that hope alive, right? I just wanted to start and give each panelist a chance to speak briefly, just for a couple minutes, about their particular sort of, maybe perhaps the first time they heard this song. And we'll start with Robin. You know, when did you first hear this song? What role does it play for you?
Sure. Before I answer the question, I just have to acknowledge how important it is for me to be back in ALBA's midst. I mean, I began with ALBA in 1990, before you. And it was there that I met people like Saul Wellman and Joe Brandt and Warren Sussman, who's in the film. And it was through ALBA that I met Mark Crawford, the late Mark Crawford, who convinced me to write a book on Thelonious Monk. So there's a lot of connections. You know, I don't remember the first time I actually heard the International, but I remember the first time it was meaningful to me. And that was in a movie theater watching Reds, which was 1982. And I remember going home and picking the melody out on the piano, because in those days you couldn't download music. You know, it was old fashioned. And then I ended up I was studying Marxism, and you know, that summer I spent reading all first three volumes of Capital, and I joined the Communist Workers' Party. And as a member of the Communist Workers' Party, we sang the song. And that was the first time it really, I mean, as a singer of the song, you know, it really meant something. It never reached the level of Lift Every Voice and Sing, but it was a song that, that you know, in a group setting, really kind of lifted the room. And of course, I went on to write histories of the communist movement and stuff, and it keeps coming back. And by the way, just one last point. I recently gave 2 lectures in South Africa and in London on the question of what would have happened if the International was a blues. And we could save that for another conversation, but it's something that still haunts me in many ways, even after all these years.
Great, thank you so much, thank you. And Holly, you know, your world has been one of the music of social justice for so long, and I just wondered if you see a connection between this song and your work and your history, and what your relationship to it might be.
Well, first of all, I just want to say my mind is reeling with the idea of it being a blues, so I'm sort of stuck back there in the conversation. And also to say, just watching the clip, I got goosebumps. You know, it's like it's in our bones, people who came through progressive upbringings. And whether, as people who will see the film later, you believe in every aspect of the lyric, like Dorothy Healy talks about some of the things she has in conflict with the lyric, but that it's also just such a hugely important anthem for a global political movement, just not in one time, but over a long period of time. So I probably first heard the song, I lived in a little farm in Northern California, maybe on a record, maybe Paul Robeson, I don't remember who I heard sing it first. My parents were lefties out in a farm community. And then again, then I didn't hear it for a while. It really wasn't part of the folk singing world, nor the Broadway world, both of which I was a part of in my early 20s. But I remember going on the Free the Army tour with Jane Fonda and Donald Sutherland. This was a tour that we did in the Pacific, Philippines, Okinawa, Japan, Hawaii. And it was working with soldiers who were opposing war and racism from within the military. And I heard it sung by revolutionaries in the Philippines and in Japan. And as we were traveling around, we did a rally with striking workers, people who worked.
Amy, you're on camera. You might want to move away.
Sorry. Oh, yeah. It's okay. People who worked for the military bases in Okinawa, and they were on strike for better wages from the U.S. military, and they were on the street singing it. So it's been. I've heard it in Chile when I've done solidarity work down in Chile, and people who were struggling against Pinochet and the military coup that happened. So most of the times that I've heard it have been in other countries, and I think it's more, tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me as if more people in other countries know that song than in the contemporary United States.
Great, thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
That's okay.
One of my first ways of seeing the song was that there's a fabulous little red, of course, songbook that Ernst Busch published in 1937 called Songs of the Spanish Civil War. I won't try to translate it into Spanish. And in the back, there were lyrics for about 20 different languages of how to sing the song in 1937 so that the International Brigades could have it at their fingertips and sing it in whatever language they chose. So Peter, the man of the hour, the person of the hour, what's your connection to the song? When did you first hear it? Do you remember?
As a college student, I got involved in radical politics, and I realized that our struggle was connected to a much longer struggle, though, you know, this was something that we all learned. We watched movies and we heard about stuff. And I joined a group called Democratic Socialists of America, which back in the day, nobody had ever heard of. And at the end of our meetings, we would sing the Internationale. We kind of thought it was archaic, or it was you know, something from the past, but it stuck with me. And I found myself making up new lyrics for it and singing it as I walked around, and it sort of filled me with hope and possibility. And then that was in the 80s. In the early 90s, as the Soviet Union fell, these pundits would get on television and say, you see, capitalism has triumphed, socialism has failed. It's clear that the left is over. And I thought, no, this is not, you know, let's talk about that capitalism is a failed experiment, and there's a lot to be learned from the ideals of the left. And how can I was becoming a documentary filmmaker, and I thought, how can I tell this story? How can I talk about the ideals that have motivated so many extraordinary, amazing people on the left for so long? And I thought, that song that we used to sing every once in a while, maybe there's a story in there. And so I started thinking about, you know, in a film, you always want to find a subject, whether it's a person or some moment or something that unites a narrative. And this song unites an unbelievable number of people. It's been sung all over the world in every language on the planet. And I started to learn about the song, and it was right around the time that the students at Tiananmen Square had sung it to protest against the Chinese government. I thought, there's something really deep here. I'd best go figure this out. And the first step in making this film, as it is with any documentary, is to say, who is very old and do I need to get to really soon? And I thought I'd best get to Pete Seeger, because he was very old, and he obviously held the key to understanding a lot about this. So I convinced a friend of mine who was a cinematographer to go up and film with Pete, figuring that he wasn't going to be around much longer. Of course, he lasted another decade. And I had a naive idea about what this song was about. And I told him what my naive ideas were. And Pete basically said, he quoted E.B. White, who's writing about, I think, writing prose. And E.B. White said, strive for simplicity, but learn to distrust it. And basically Pete sat down, and for 45 minutes, he gave me a monologue about just how complicated the journey of this song has been and what we might learn from it. And I thought, whew, this is amazing. Let's make this movie. 7 years later, I finished a half-an-hour film, and Pete stuck around for many more years after that.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. So please start sending your questions in the chat, and Dennis will send them to me. And I've noticed a couple of other comments that I think some people are interested in knowing what was the most difficult piece of footage for you to track down? In other words, you have so much interesting footage in the film. Where did some of that unusual footage come from, or where did you have to go to get it?
Well, I started making this film in 1993 and finished it in 2000. And back then, it was before the internet was the force in our lives that it was. And so a lot of knowledge had to be shared by doing things like calling people on the telephone or going to archives. You couldn't just sort of go on YouTube and find footage of the Internationale, or for that matter, recordings of the song. And the fact that it took me so long to make was really frustrating. It would have to do with trying to raise money for a film about singing about socialism. But the ideas kept coming from my friends and from people I barely knew who would say, "Oh, I just saw a clip in a British wartime movie where they're singing the Internationale," or "Have you heard that reggae version?" And I'm like, "Reggae version? Really? You know, have you seen it?" One after another, over the years, every 6 months, someone would phone me and say, "I've got another idea." But I think maybe the piece of footage that I'm the most proud of, including in the film, is from Bertolucci's 1900, the great epic story of class struggle in Italy. And there's a man with an accordion walking down the railroad tracks playing the Internationale. And I phoned Bertolucci and said, "Do you think we might be able to use this in my film?" And he said, "Yes." So but there was so much, and so much of it had to do with the fact that this film about socialism was really a collective effort in which so many people threw their talents and their ideas into helping tell this story, not the least of whom was my brilliant filmmaking collaborator, Amy Linton, who edited the film.
Great.
That's
Thank
a
you.
lovely scene with the accordion. It's great. I love that scene.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Robin, since it provoked a response in Holly, do you want to talk a little more about the Internationale as a blues?
Right. Yes, I would actually love to. The instigation, I should say, inspiration, but really instigation, comes from Amiri Baraka, who talked about the blues as not just art, but a dialectic with people in motion, confronting catastrophe, you know, and like deepening their social consciousness. And he has this line where he talks about the cycle, the circle. And then I thought, okay, you know, the Internationale expresses a kind of triumphalism, you know, a kind of an imagined proletariat marching arm in arm to overthrow the bourgeoisie, to emancipate productive forces, you know, but the blues, blues is not just dominant seventh chords or blues scales. It's not just turnarounds. It's a kind of an open-endedness of the structure that's an imperative to improvise, so that the blues goes on and on with more choruses and more choruses and more choruses. And that's our life. And so imagine, and the blues also has like raw honesty, a kind of an embrace of aspects of politics like sex, pleasure, you know. It imagines a working class that's beyond the industrial proletariat, but all the people who toil. So imagine what that means if the Internationale was this open-ended, funky form in which then people come and add more choruses, not just an official rewriting of it, you know, but a people's kind of rewriting of it. And so I gave a whole talk about this, and one day will be an essay. And then also sat at the piano and played it as a blues, which may not be the 12-bar form, but there's a way in which, if you played it like, I think I played an E flat, there's a way in which you can make it sound like a blues and slow it down in a way that's very different from the way Pete Seeger talks about in the film, where the Soviet Union slowed it down as a way to make it ponderous. You could slow it down and make it funky.
Yeah. Thank goodness. That's great. Thanks, Robin. So I'm looking at a question from Joanna B. Was the Internationale sung in the U.S. union organizing movement? I know of many original and derivative union protest songs from the UMW, etc. Did they sing the Internationale in the union movement in the U.S.? Anyone know the answer to that question, or?
Well, I can't back it up, but yes, I'm yes. I don't know even how to document it, but yes, it was. It just because I think because of the huge anti-communism that took place here in the 50s and the associating of that song with the Soviet Union and with Russian takeover and with losing your rights as a human being and all the kinds of things that the media here and which was owned by the power structures here, always try to make anything that rises up to unify people into a scary story or an embarrassing story or an insulting story. I mean, and it's not just this, I'm trying to think of other examples, but the burning of the bra in the women's movement. So it happened one day, somebody threw a girdle in a thing, you know, I don't know what it was, but it became this, it was a way to make a joke out of something that was actually not funny. It was a way to make a joke out of something that was very complicated. And it's the same that and you take it the other side where you take a hero, an extraordinary leader like Martin Luther King, and put him so on a pedestal, even the people who killed him, lift him up and put him on a pedestal, which says to all the other young Black people in the world, he was an exception. The rest of you can't do this. We will name all kinds of buildings after him and we will name streets after him, but the movement's over because none of you are as exceptional as he is. And those are the ways in which the media takes the essence of who we are, no matter what side of the spectrum or the other, and just diminishes us, wipes us out. And so I guess I just wanted to say, yes, that song was sung here, and whether people were diminished and insulted and the story was mistold, yes, that happened too.
Yeah. And I will say thank you. And someone noted in the chat that she's trained her cat to come running when she sings the Internationale. So it's reaching the animal kingdom as well. Right. So going along with one
Wobblies,
of the,
didn't the Wobblies? They must have sung the Internationale.
Yeah, someone pointed out that it's probably in one of the IWW songbooks.
Absolutely.
It would very likely be.
Yes. I could add one little thing to that, is that that's absolutely, Holly's absolutely right. It was sung among certain unions and left unions, because remember, there's a Trade Union Unity League, which was the communist unions, the IWW, they also sang Solidarity Forever. But also one thing to keep in mind is that the International is not actually as old as we think. I mean, Pete Seeger was right that the Paris Commune was the beginnings of the lyrics, but it was sung to the Marseille. And it wasn't until like 1888 when the Gaiter basically put those lyrics to it, that was sung with a new melody, which we come to associate with. And so it really, I mean, it did persist into the 20th century, but absolutely the Cold War, and even before that, the Red Scare in the 1930s, crushed the spirit of that song, and it's always resurrected.
Yeah, great. So we're gonna give one of the questioners a chance to speak to the group, and we'll unmute her. Emma Lang had an interesting question about people's reluctance to sing the song because of oppression. Dennis, can you unmute Emma so she can put that question to us?
Oops. Hi there. Can you see me? Okay.
Yes.
I can't see myself. Yeah, so I'm from a red diaper family. And for me, the song was one that I'm in my 30s, I should say. So for me, the song when I was growing up was a song that I probably knew it less well just because it's, I would say, less kid-friendly than a lot of union songs. But I certainly don't remember not knowing it, but it also was deeply associated with things you weren't allowed to talk about out of the house, which comes from what I would characterize as a sort of multi-generational trauma that comes from my family's experience during the Red Scare. And I'm sure this is something that happened to other people. And I was curious if other folks or any of the people who'd been interviewed for the film had talked about that, and how it's something that there's a way in which it's very coded as to you are one of us because you know that, but it's also very associated with those traumas of Red Scares. I also want to add, I live in Canada now, and I was curious if those sort of feelings that you can't sing it out of the house go in other countries as well, because I know in Canada there were also extreme anti-communism actions by the governments, and so, but we always talk about it as, oh well, everyone else sings it in the US, there was so much oppression, but I'm curious if that's actually the case.
Anyone want to take that? Peter?
I didn't get to include everybody who I interviewed in the film. Some people ended up on the cutting room floor. One interview I did was with a man from Portugal who talked about, during the dictatorship there, singing it, putting a needle on the record player and turning the volume way, way down to listen to the Internationale with his friends and his comrades. And it was a secret that they had to keep, but they all kept it going and alive in their lives. And I think this was true everywhere. And Emily, thank you for sharing that, because I think that's absolutely right. This was a song of great pride and great unity, and it was also a song that became associated with communism, and with it was a song that you couldn't sing out loud in most places in the world. And curiously, one of the reasons I made this film was because I had heard the students at Tiananmen Square singing this song. And so here's a song, and I said, why were you singing a song about communism, the song that is the anthem of your government that you're protesting against? And Li Lu, who was one of the student leaders, said to me, it's part of our tradition is that when you're about to give your life in sacrifice, you sing. And we thought, what is a song that is really meaningful to us? The most meaningful song we can think of, and it was the Internationale. So here you have people who are, to me, that was just so complicated and interesting and dialectic and beautiful and moving.
Beautiful. Thank you for your question, Emma. Thanks a lot. There's a question from Andrew Tauber. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and we're going to open up your mic, Dennis. Yeah? Andrew?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hey, Peter, it's Andy.
Hi, Andy.
Hey. Yeah, I was curious. I mean, you're in the film, which is excellent, by the way. You make clear that there are many, many versions of the song, not only in different languages, but even within a single language. There are different versions in English. You point out British, US, and then the newer version by Billy Bragg. I was just curious how, over time, the lyrics have been politicized and how they've evolved, as a result of political divisions or repression or whatever. I was curious that aspect of it.
That's a great question. At the end of the song, I mean, the lyrics remain fairly similar for most of the song, and it's sung to the same melody in every language that I ran into it, except for in Bangladesh, where it has a completely different melody. But every other country on the planet that I researched sings the same French 19th century, melody that Pierre D.G wrote way back when. But that last line of the song, the international working class shall free the human race, or the international ideal shall be the human race, or the international Soviet shall free or be the human race, or the international union. It may seem like a small detail, but I think people could have come to blows over these things because they reflected the different ways in which people from different parts of the left saw the role of the revolutionary struggle. And I hand out a lyric sheet when showing this movie and people sing the song, but everyone sings the last line a little bit differently.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Very true. Thanks for the question. And I know that, there are many examples of songs, and I know Holly has experience with it, Robin probably as well, union songs, labor songs that, given the political changes that were going on in the US, that lyrics adjusted when the AFL and CIO split over communists in the unions. The lyrics would change, but the songs lived on. So the next question is from Pamela Spoon. And I think, Holly, you may have some perspective on this. Pamela, can we open up her mic, please?
Hello?
Hello.
Hi. Yes, I was.
Uh-oh. You're muted.
Unmute. Okay.
You're back.
I'm back. I was interested in the popularity of the song in Latin America and Africa. Most of the evidence in the film dealt with the United States and Europe and a little bit of Asia. So other than the reggae version, I was interested to know more. because I know the left was strong in those areas as well.
Do you know anything about that, Holly, or is that something you're familiar with?
It is, and the International is very powerful in Latin America. It's also, though, they are such extraordinary writers of anthems that they have many others. So it's not the dominant anthem, but it's definitely one that I would say most progressives, left of center people would know. The songs that have come out of the more recent revolutions in Latin America are very prominent as well, like, you know, the El Pueblo Unido Jamás Será Vencido, and da 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 da, you know, is a very popular melody in Latin America, and it sort of replaces the Internationale in that they have their own. But yes, it's a part of it. I don't know about Africa so much.
Yeah, could I jump in on that too?
Please.
By the way, that is Pam Sporn, one of the great filmmakers who asked that question. Great documentarian. So thanks, Pam, for just being here. You know, South Africa, all over Africa, wherever there was a left, the Communist Party in particular, it was sung, and especially in South Africa. And there's two little stories. One is that there, you know, the South African post-apartheid government is the tripartite alliance, which includes the ANC, the South African Communist Labor Unions, as well as the Communist Party. And so the song was really important. Early on, even before there was a Communist Party in South Africa, sanitation workers, sewage workers in South Africa were part of a group called the International Socialist League, and they would sing it. The Industrial Workers of Africa, IWA, they sang it. And then if you go online, there's a publication called New Frame, and they have online a beautiful version in Afrikaans by Lila Goldenwald and I think Mervyn Williams playing guitar. And it uses the kind of township rhythm of township music, which we associate with the anti-apartheid struggles, Soweto uprising. And it's just really beautiful. And you don't think of Afrikaans as like a revolutionary language. You think of it as a language of oppression in the moment of the Soweto uprising. At the same time, you know, that was a song designed to be sung in every language, right? And one last little tidbit, I just love this. Back in the 1920s, 1924, when a group of Black communists, members of the African Blood Brotherhood, were trying to take over a kind of all-race conference called the Negro Sanhedrin, they put forward a proposal to make the Internationale the anthem of Negro freedom. It didn't work, but they put it up there, and that would be, you know, globally in some respects. So it's everywhere, you know, everywhere. The one thing I should also add is that in Chicago, you have kind of the flip side, where you had a group of Black communists who tried to change the lyrics of Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is considered the Black national anthem. And there was a line where they had, you know, facing the red, red sun of a new day begun, which was to make it a kind of version of the Internationale using the lyrics, the music rather, of Lift Every Voice and Sing by James Weldon Johnson, J. Rosamund Johnson.
Beautiful. Thank you, Robin. I'm going to move to a question from Linda Paul in a moment, but I just wanted to mention something that came up in the chat. And the person doesn't have a name, just a large group of letters. But there is zero coverage of the Arab Muslim world in the film in this conversation, yet several of us taught the Palestinians to sing a version of this song against the Israeli exploitation of Palestinian workers that has been going on for 72 years. And just a question about, were this film made today, would it include larger international movements? But I think that it's an interesting point, and to think about teaching this song. My sense is that that's one of the things that this song does, is that people learn it and get taught it in the moments of revolutionary crisis as a way to gather and as a way to find solidarity. So let me move to Linda Paul's question, if you can find her, Dennis. Thank you. If not, I will move on.
Well, while you're finding her, I just want to speak to
Yes,
that
please.
comment that you just made, because I think that these songs are essentially so important for a variety of reasons, one of which is I think we tend to exaggerate our political identifications when we're trying to do the impossible. And this song has so much courage in it. It's so like invincible that no matter what the struggle is, it just makes you think that you can change the world. And actually changing the world is more complicated than that. But I've noticed that in almost every movement, people have an exaggerated identification of their issue. I can remember in the early women's movement, it said, if you want the job done, hire a woman. And I wanted to go around and write on all the posters, if you want the job done, hire a woman who knows how to do the job. But before that, because women were getting hired to do things that they didn't know how to do and then being put down for it, instead of being trained and taught and rising up into the workforce. And so, but we say these things in order to have the courage to break down the walls that seem just too high to climb. And the music of something like the Internationale has that sort of invincible feeling about it. But underneath all of that are all the political differences we have, the ways in which early on we didn't deal with race and racism after the war ended in Indochina. I mean, what if when we'd all come home from Vietnam, whether in our minds or our activism or whatever, we had faced racism right then and there. That was the next struggle that should have happened. And instead, a lot of people in the left went to South Africa, went to Latin America, went to Solidarity because they just didn't want to deal with it at home. So I guess what I'm saying is that these songs keep us connected, even though underneath all of that, we're fighting and struggling on so many levels around so many things that make it very difficult for us to win as a global or international movement.
Thanks, Holly. Thank you. And it turns out that Linda doesn't have a microphone, but I'm going to pose her question to Peter and expand on it a little bit. She was asking if the film is shown to activists and young people today. And I just wondered, Peter, if you could talk a little bit about, because the film's been around for a while, particular situations that where the film has been screened, that it's had a particular impact, or where you felt that there was something happening in relation to people being exposed to this material. You know, many of us know the song, so we're learning more about it, as opposed to people who may not know about the song. Have you had any experiences in the screening of the film over the years that are worth mentioning?
Well, it is a song that's known by older people more than it's known by younger people. And, but it has, and my goal in making this movie was to teach it to younger people and to get the, and not just this song, but the idea of internationalism, which is so central to what the song is about. There's a scene in the film in which Bill Sussman, the Spanish Civil War veteran who was in the Abraham Lincoln Brigade and went to fight fascism in the 1930s, is wounded in battle, and he's in a field hospital in the Spanish Civil War, and they're trying to entertain themselves. And how do they do it? You have people from every country on earth lying there in their hospital beds, and one starts singing the Internationale, and the other one picks up the next lyric in a different language. And he said it was sung in Spanish and English and Urdu and Tamil and Russian and whatever, all these different languages. To me, that's a message which, you know, expanding on what Holly was just saying, the struggle is complicated and there's all kinds of problems, but if we recognize that it also is global, that's such an important message. And so, yeah, I've shown this film to, you know, old Reds, and I've shown this to people who've never heard the song before. And I always want them to sing and learn it, because I think there's a message in, you know, what we can learn from the past and what how we can imagine our movement in a really global way. And in answer to a question a little while ago, if I had to make this movie again, it would be a different movie, because the things we create, the songs we write, or the movies we make, or the books we write, are always rooted in the stuff that we're thinking about right now. And so I made a movie about a song that was written in 1871, and the music was written in the 1880s or 1890s, and it was sung throughout the 20th century. I'd love to make a sequel, but you know, the point is the message remains consistent. The Internationale could unite us, and that's what Billy Bragg was thinking when he rewrote the lyrics to the song. to bring it up to date for where he was.
Which he sang at Pete Seeger's memorial, not memorial, his 90th birthday concert at Madison Square Garden.
One of the most moving events I've ever attended.
Yeah, I will agree. So Robin, there's a question for you, and it comes from Nell Geyser, and I think Dennis is going to open up Nell's microphone if I have that name correct. It's looks like on my screen. So Dennis? Nell?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
So I'm not sure if this is going to be a successful question, but I'll try. If you had to talk about the song, and very much what Peter was just talking about, as a metaphor for internationalism on the left, what do you think the trajectory of the song says about the potential and limitations for internationalism within the current world order and the left of the past century or so?
I would love to hear what Robin and Holly have to say about
Your mic is off, Robin.
Sorry, yeah. No, that's an excellent question. You know, there's a part in the film that's very important where people, Dorothy Healy in particular, criticizes the idea of, you know, the loss of tradition. Archie Green does the same thing. And there's a way in which the line of, you know, no more traditions, change shall bind us, becomes a kind of a weight, especially at the time when I think Peter's doing these interviews, where there's a real struggle among the US left, let alone US left solidarity with, you know, international solidarity, with other movements that don't necessarily subscribe to the idea that the past is completely erased for something new. In fact, it's, you know, the traditions sometimes that are religious, that can be the spark for, you know, grassroots uprisings and rebellion, right? You know, so in that sense, I think, you know, I think that we have to treat the song as something that can't do everything and never could do everything. And part of the problem, I think, and this is what I learned from my teacher, Cedric Robinson, is that even though it was written by an anarchist, remember that, you know, not a communist, an anarchist, there's a way in which it still carries a kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? A kind of stadial view of history. That is that we're going to go through these stages and that the future is inevitable, that we, you know, we just keep fighting. And it doesn't really attend to the kind of catastrophes and differential catastrophes that people experience. You know, there's no such thing as a single proletariat. It just never existed. There are people who are differentially situated to capital and to imperialism and to oppression. And sometimes the people who are oppressed in one way benefit from the oppression of others. So how do we get past that? Not by a song, but by really rethinking our whole relationship to one another as a planet. If anything, we've got to get past this idea that we're sort of naturally unified, but think of unity as something we strive for and fight for, not just the overthrow of capital, but really trying to figure out how to become you know, one with the earth. And so if I were to go back and try to figure out how to rewrite the song, I would begin with indigenous people, not just in North America, but around the globe, who are trying to figure out how do you you know, build a sense of solidarity, not with other people, not with other nations, but with the earth itself, you know? And so it requires a rethinking, but that's why I go back to the blues. The blues never got stuck anywhere, you know? And, you know, and it's up to people themselves collectively to figure out what's the lyric to build a movement that could be transformative and transform ourselves so we produce new lyrics.
Robin, that was just superb. Thank you. That was just amazing. And I think that the same thing happens with, I've seen it with women who are the kind of elders in the women's movement who have said to me, where are all the young people? Where are the young women writing these songs? And when I say, well, they exist. And if you don't know where they are, you need to go find them rather than assume they aren't there just because you don't know about it. When I was 19, 20, 21, 25, people didn't know about my music unless they wanted to come and find it. And it wasn't, I know Dorothy Healy and I had this conversation where there was part of her that I thought was so excited to see this new group of women coming out, and also part of her that wanted to just say, you all are so naive. Have you not read anything that we wrote before? You know, there's that generational struggle of, and I see that now. I am so glad there's a new generation of artists that just don't care about me, are just walking all over everything we did, don't even know it happened, because that naivete in a way, that being so focused on themselves and full of themselves is going to create something new and extraordinary. Later on, just like I did with Dorothy, they'll look back and see they walk on this long path. But there is a real requirement for next generation thinking to just break out of that tradition that you're talking about and just say, and I love what you said about the verses would be about Indigenous people, about the earth. I mean, that is, so that's the full spectrum of it. It's going back to the very beginning and then breaking out in the forward motion of it. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Holly. I have to say, Robin, there's a groundswell of interest in hearing a few bars of the blues version of the Internationale. Are you willing to share them with us in this moment? You have to turn on your mic.
No, I don't have it. I can't play it. I'm in my office, actually. I don't have a piano.
All right.
I wouldn't play it anyway.
All right. Peter, Dorothy. See, we got it.
Out there has a guitar. What?
It's there. We have it. People ask for it. We have it.
That's it.
Peter, since a number of people have been asking about the interview with Dorothy Healy, because that was so special for so many folks, can you just talk about, this is probably one of our last questions, or maybe we'll have time for one more, but Peter, could you talk about that a little bit?
You know, part of this exercise, and Holly, I love what you're saying about young people doing their own thing and then discovering elders later on. This was an exercise making this movie in me seeking out elders in a way. And so going to Pete Seeger to just say, help, school me. You know, I'd like to know more about this history. But Dorothy Healy, you know, who I met through other documentary films. I saw her in Seeing Red. I saw her, I believe she may have been in Union Maid. She was in these beautiful films of the 70s and 80s. And I sort of knew her as this extraordinary figure of social change. And I thought, I've got to find her and ask her what she knows about this. And she was living in Washington, D.C., and I went down and just asked a bunch of dumb questions, and she was so generous and wise in telling me what she knew. And it was Dorothy who turned me on to her friend who had heard the reggae version, which is how he ended up, and that song ended up in the film. She's like, did you hear the reggae version? So yeah. It was
Maurice Jackson, right?
Maurice Jackson, who, you know, had been at a central committee meeting of the Communist Party, and somebody plays a reggae version, and the old farts are like, oh, what's that? He's like, ooh, that's pretty good. It was my feeling. And this was Dorothy's intervention to get me there. So, you know, having the opportunity to go and listen to what Dorothy Healy has to say, or Bill Sussman, or, you know, Marina Faleo Gonzalez, whose father in the Philippines had organized farm workers and sang the Internationale as an organizing thing. Or, you know, there's so many extraordinary older people who I got to listen to. That's just, you know, and Dorothy Healy, you know, it's not a good way to make a living, and anyone thinking about being a documentary filmmaker, don't do it. But it gives you the chance to go and spend an afternoon in Dorothy Healy's living room asking her big open-ended questions.
That's great. I will, one question that's sort of humorous that I'll ask is that you might want to ask, this is from, I don't remember, from Nancy Roman, you might want to ask how many people here use this song to awaken their children. I did, and I was hysterical when I saw Josh Kornbluth's comedy routine where he imitated his father doing this. So that's a good thing to remember, good moment. Let's see. There's some great things in the chat about people from different countries. Someone put in the lyrics in Afrikaans to the Internationale. Is there anything? Do each of you have a sentence or two that you'd like to share as we wrap this up? Anything from the panelists that you'd like to say, Robin? Anything comes to mind that feels important to bring out?
I yield my time.
Okay.
Oh no, don't! Oh no!
I feel like I've been talking too much. I mean,
Never. It was beautiful.
Okay. Well, I'll just say in 30 seconds. I mean, I'm just so happy that we can have this conversation, because this is not a song that people sing anymore. I remember in the 1980s, it was not uncommon to hear it. And now, given the fact we have so much struggle taking place, so much activism on the ground, so many organizations, this is not, it's not a song that's sung. And I think it's worth revisiting it, not to resurrect it, but to really think about the promise that it offered, and also how to move beyond that promise to some other ones, you know, and to really deal with the catastrophe we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, thank you. Holly?
Wrap-up sentences are always give me the heebie-jeebies. I think what I mostly want to say is to see this film, if you haven't, whoever's watching this and listening to this interview. It's very inspiring. And it's flawed because the people who are filmed are flawed, not because of the filmmaker. There are things that are going to be left out. There are things that aren't there. But for 30 minutes, there's a really exciting and goosebumpy kind of story going on here. And to be able to take something from that is old and that has lasted all these years, and also put it together with the writing of new anthems for next generation artists to come along, and you don't sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write an anthem, but you write songs that have a camera lens on them that allows so the essence of the best songs I've written has been when the camera is in close on a detail, and then it pulls back, and you see the whole world is focusing in one way or the other on the same sort of basic heartbeat of the world. And I would just encourage writers, songwriters, poets, filmmakers, whoever, to just keep putting out the material that will inspire us for generations to come, in the same way that this song has for so long.
Great, thank you. And Peter, I'm going to give you the question that people are asking you to answer. If they want to see this film after today, what do they do?
Go to willowpondfilms.com, and there will be a link there to how you can watch the Internationale. I'd love for everyone to see it and screen it. willowpondfilms.com, and that's my website with all my movies. Being on a panel, having a conversation with Holly and Robin and you, Peter, this is, I'm just flabbergasted how cool and wonderful this is.
That's great.
And with all the people who have joined us, thank you for, here's the Internationale, and we're all getting together on an afternoon, a lovely summer afternoon, and thinking about revolutionary music. It gives me hope. And these are not hopeful times, but thank you everybody for participating in this.
Yes, thank you, Peter. Thank you,
Thank
Holly.
you.
Thank you, Robin. Hope.
Right.
So I want you to know that some of the questions we haven't gotten to answer, we have a record of the chat. We will try to get answers to you. Also, if you have a question that you weren't able to ask, the ALBA email address will be going into the chat, info@alba.valb.org. If you want to send a question, we will try to answer it. I will also say that these free events that ALBA is doing, and these film screenings and their other events, are made possible by donations from people such as you. So if you have the opportunity, you'll see a link in the chat for ALBA's website, or you can find it online, alba-valb.org, and you could make a donation that way. And lastly, I want you all to know that on September 15th, Saturday at 2 p.m. Pacific time and 5 p.m. Eastern time, the next online ALBA event will be taking place, which is a celebration of the rededication of the San Francisco Monument to the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, honoring the 2,800 who served in Spain. You can see the website for more information. Isabel Allende will be appearing on that. We have music, we have speeches. It will be quite an event that's coming to you from the Bay Area Friends of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archives. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Peter now to cue us into our wrap-up sing-along. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
So every time I've shown this film over the past couple decades with a real crowd, not a virtual one, I've never tried doing this before. So this is a bold experiment in the spirit of the song. We always end with a sing-along. We're going to try this. Here's how it works. We're all going to try to sing. We're going to be in the wrong rhythm, in the wrong key, but it doesn't matter. And the only thing is that often people, when they come to the chorus of the song, it's the final conflict, you put your fist up in the air. That's the only instruction I give. Maybe there should be a lyric sheet in the chat, right? Which is, yep, there's a link to the lyrics. If you can open it up, it's like a PDF. It's got the song in English, American English, British English, Billy Bragg's new version, Spanish, Russian, and a bunch of other languages. Feel free to sing. I'm going to start singing, but Holly has a much better voice, so I'm going to try to sing quieter and let everybody else just join in and sing. And thank you so much for being a part of this. I don't know what key I'm going to start in. I hope it's E flat for Robin on the piano. Arise, ye prisoners of starvation. Arise, wretched of
That was stupendous. Talk about a Grammy Award.
Wish I knew it in Hungarian.
Thank you everyone for coming. What is the date of the San Francisco event? Can someone tell me, because it was wrong?
Saturday, September 12th.
Saturday, September 12th. My mistake. Saturday, September 12th, the San Francisco event. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
I hope everyone has a healthy time. Stay safe and stay well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.